pushing out some Battletech Tactica, looking at the hex map or the gaming table that you're playing, physically terrain, the terrain in Battletech, the terrain in Wargaming. Now, certainly it's there to set the narrative. We've got our miniatures, we've got the terrain, we've got smoke and battle damage effects, we've got the music, we've got the snacks, we're ready to go. We're trying to step out of space and time and to create this simulation. And having a table with good terrain or really drilling down on the hex maps does that. But we also want to consider the tactical implications, things to look out that will give us an advantage in the mission or give us an advantage based on some of the mechs that we're planning to play, some of the mechs that we're running, either planning ahead of time or you just happen to bring some of your favorite mechs to the table. Let's look at hills. Let's look at elevation. Battletech, when you're playing on a hex map, everything is broken down to the point where there is no misunderstanding. You have range in hexes, you have level 1, level 2, level 3 elevations, you have water with sub-elevations and how they work. Everything is reduced down to this equation, essentially very binary, yes or no. Are you in range? Are you out of range? Is there a level giving you partial cover on your mech, or are you completely obscured? When we move over to a traditional wargaming table, even if you make the terrain specific for Battletech, once you remove the hexes and the modifiers on the hills and you're going true line of sight, yes, visually it opens up things massively, but you have to be ready a little bit to work with whoever you're playing. I was going to say opponent. I don't really like the term opponent because it's more friends. And how can someone really be your opponent when you're playing Battletech every week for years? But looking at that perspective, you kind of have an idea, level 1, level 2, and the way things work. But being able to bend a little bit, being able to call that judgment, even if it gives your friend an advantage, that's okay. Keep the game moving. So what can we do with some hills? What can we do with elevation? And this is also true for City Fight, City Tech, but City Fight, City Tech has elevations with a basement. You could have the building collapse. You could get crushed in the basement. You can destroy terrain. We will follow up with that in part 2. I'll post that a little bit later this week up to the archive. The first thing with hills, they're going to give you cover depending on the elevation. They're going to obscure your legs. What that means is any hit going in on that aspect of the hit location table is just going to be ignored. That's pretty big, especially inner sphere. If you're getting hit with a PPC or something else with some good damage, to just have it hit the dirt, big, big, big. Second to that is, depending on the elevation, it might allow you to get up close to your opponent without them being able to shoot you. So if they have, I'm just kind of polarizing a little bit as an example, if they have a support mech, they've got 2 Jaeger mechs ready to go, just field of fire, and you're playing something like a Grasshopper, which has good mobility, good speed, decent armor. You've got the lasers. Grasshopper wants to get up close. Yeah, you've got the LRM-5 in the head that gives you something to do, but it wants to get up close and really push those lasers and utilize those heat sinks. You walk out into an open field, you're just going to get lit up. But if there's a hill somewhere, if there's correct elevation somewhere, then that allows you to move up. That allows you an avenue of approach. So that's the first thing we're looking at. Cutting off, obscuring part of your mech, or completely obscured, being able to move up. Tactically, if you have something like a longbow, an archer, now actually this is true of any long-range missile system, whether it's on a mech or a vehicle, but usually something that has redundancy or a few, could be 2 mechs working that way. You can indirect fire if you have a spotter. This is a unit that in the narrative is in position, is able to kind of relay the coordinates, relay where you are, and someone can indirectly shoot those long-range missiles. There's going to be range modifiers, there's going to be cover modifiers, potentially. There is going to be a penalty or a bonus, depending on which way you look at it. When firing indirect, it makes things much harder to do, especially if it's at range. But look, it's a free shot that you can reach out And it also has the ability to indirect over other targets. So in this case, with a hill, you're hiding behind the hill and indirecting over. It could work the other way. If you have your archers and longbows parked and your opponent's rightfully so is like, look, I don't want to get soaked on the way in. They're hiding behind a hill. You can shoot those over. Side note, also pushed up to the archive. I'm giving you permission right now. Go out, get some stands of infantry, and get a Karnov. That is going to be an amazing delivery system. And turn one is just going to let you zoom in that infantry. Total battle value buy-in for Karnov and infantry, just regular infantry, nothing big, not even jump infantry, is a couple of hundred battle value. It's nothing, even in a 3K smaller game. Turn one, you zip in. Turn two, you release the infantry just somewhere in the middle of the table. You have great indirect. Great spotting on there. A lot of stuff. I've pushed up Karnovs. I've pushed up infantry. We want to master that. But that's an example of a great spotter. Another example might be a light mech. So we see this indirect fire. Third thing to keep in mind, and this is very situational, but, Battletech, things tend to get up close. The difference between the punch and the kick table. The difference between punching and kicking. Now, this is an equation based on the tonnage. It's not to say I'm not going to kick you with my Locust. I probably will, but there's a big difference between getting kicked by a light and medium mech versus a heavy mech. There's a massive difference between getting kicked from an assault mech, 100-ton mech, a stalker kicking, right? A stalker walking up to you, weapons blazing, lasers burning, missiles firing, and then kicking you, literally drop kicking you, literally axe kicking you is insane. But the kicks, while they do more damage based on the motivation of the tonnage, they're confined to the lower part of the mech. The punch table, and we've gotten more into punching, but the punch table, if you don't fire a weapon, you can punch. That goes on a separate location table, 1 in 6 chance to hit the head. That's huge. That's huge because even if you don't knock the head clean off, you have a good chance of breaching armor. Then it's a roll to confirm for crit, and it's a pilot consciousness check for each hit that you get. That is big. And I'm going to make a note here. We've got to talk about headshots, how to maximize headshots, and what can we do. If you're at a proper elevation, then when you kick, so if I'm elevated and you are not elevated, I actually had this happen. When you release enough locusts, when you're throwing down 8 to 12 locusts, they're just going to run around and find the most opportune thing. And there was a stalker at the base of a hill. It had put its back against the hill and was just blasting away. I had the MP, the movement points. I run up the hill. I start kicking that stalker right in the face. Instead of being on the kick table. Now, the tonnage modifier for the Locust is nothing. I mean, you guys can crunch the numbers. It's nothing. But it's going on the punch chart. So if there's a chance, especially if it's city fight, if there's a chance based on the elevation of the building, this is where jump jets become brutal in city fight. Almost mandatory. Almost mandatory. That and big guns. If you can jump up onto a building and now, based on the elevation calculation, be able to kick a mech in the head, that's big. So tactically looking at the terrain, and often what we see on the hex maps, open terrain, we'll see rubble, we'll see hills with elevation, we'll see light forests, heavy forests, and it is there water. I can't tell you the last time I played on a water map. I've made a note. We need to do a game on a water map, but there are elements to that in pushing forward, using the terrain, asking the question, how can it improve your mission? And how can it utilize the strengths of your mechs?